Hello, everybody. We're live again. Oh, so fantastic. Welcome to all the free thinkers, conservatives, liberals, leftists, everybody who's going to be eventually watching this show, we hope. This is Unapologetic Live. How crazy is that? So, new show. We told you guys there's new content happening after Will and Amala saw itself out. Will's coming out with a new show here shortly, so be on the lookout for that as well. And a lot of you are asking me, is Taylor going to be on the new show? Taylor, are you going to be on this new show? Is Taylor here?
Am I here? I don't know. Where are we in this moment in time? It's, honestly, it's like, it's like riding a bike. It feels great to be back. We've been working so hard on this set and just all the promotions and everything, but we're back. Feels really good to be back. And it's just like riding a bike.
It's just like riding a bike. We're back. So I figured, I was thinking about, what do we make this first episode of Unapologetic Live? How do we bring in this show? And I want to talk about first the format of the show, how it's going to work. It's going to be a daily show that we do every single weekday, coming to you at 3 p.m. Pacific at 6 o'clock Eastern, my bad guys. And every day we're going to be talking about a new issue, taking a deep dive into a different subject matter. We're going to be talking about Disney, whether or not we can constitute that as grooming, which is a big debate among conservatives and leftists right now. We're going to be talking about TikTok. We're going to be talking about transgenderism and gender theory and critical race theory, things that are happening in the news, things that people are talking about, trending topics on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and all those platforms. And every day we'll come to you with something new. Now, if you guys were on YouTube yesterday and you're subscribed to this channel, you saw a video go up about policing in America and how I used to hate cops. I used to think the cops were racist. I was terrified of them due to the indoctrination of my past. As some of you know, I was a woke leftist, not even, 4 years ago now? Insane. So we made a video about that, really identifying whether or not the police in America are systemically racist. Now, I came to the conclusion that they are not, and you can go and check out that video and see the facts that I found to get to that conclusion. See if you disagree. I saw a lot of people in the comments going through their own personal experiences with police officers, how they came to their own conclusion on the subject matter. And really what we want to do with this channel is have open, compassionate, good faith conversations about the issues that everyone's talking about. I think so much of what we need right now is dialogue, and that's something that I want to encourage with this show. So this is not just a show for people who are conservative. It's a show for anybody and everyone who is willing to listen to an opinion that they may or may not agree with. And we're going to start off the show just by talking about the issue at hand, going through the different perspectives that people have on it, what their possible biases might be, what my possible biases and blinders might be, and then we'll sort of go through some research and try to come to a conclusion on things. Now, like I said, go and check out that policing video, see what you guys think about it, leave a comment down below. And another thing that I really want to accomplish with this show is sort of stepping outside of what is considered to be the mainstream narrative, because so much of what we hear is just this cookie cutter version of what people want you to know and the things that they want you to think. And we see this so often on social media, we see this in news media, we're now seeing it in our schools, we're seeing it in Hollywood and entertainment, where really you just turn on a show right now and I feel like I'm just getting nothing more than political propaganda, even with things that are purely meant to be entertainment. So really analyzing these mainstream narratives and seeing, is what is being said here really true? What are the motivations behind people saying these things? Why might somebody want to trick you into believing something? And, am I right about this? And as much as I want to call out other people for lying and being wrong and promoting false narratives, I also want to have that accountability with myself. So if I say something that is false or that promotes a bias of mine, I want that to be called out. I want us to come to the bottom of that argument and really find out why we believe the things that we believe and how we get to objective truth, because that's what I think we need to start finding in this society. Again, so people of differing thoughts, welcome. Today, I wanted to sort of lay the groundwork and reintroduce myself, because I know a lot of you know me. You're watching on PragerU, you're watching on the Unapologetic channel right now, which halfway through this show, we're actually going to be transitioning over to my channel, Amala Unapologetic. It's in the description down below. Hopefully Spencer or Taylor will also put that down in the chat. I want you guys to be watching over there. So halfway through the show, we are going to cut out on PragerU and head over there.
That's just on YouTube, by the way. So if you're watching on Facebook, you're good. You can stay there.
Exactly. Yeah. So just on YouTube. Now, let's talk about this. Taylor, obviously, we know, I've already told everybody I used to be a leftist. Were you ever a leftist in your life, or have anything that deviated from, mainstream conservative belief?
I was never very political. I was definitely never a leftist. I was just raised in a very conservative Christian home and environment. So I'm on the flip side of the coin from you. Is there my experience with fundamentalism, or not thinking for yourself? It is more on that side of like religious fundamentalism and beliefs in the church that I just believe because I was told to, or kind of just raised in that world and never wasn't really thinking for myself, but was just going along with it. So my journey was more one of looking for objective truth and distilling out the dogma that I was just fed through religion, rather than distilling out dogma I was fed from a leftist upbringing.
Right. And I feel like everybody sort of has those journeys in life. You have the things that you're taught as a child and the things that sort of stick with you from your cultural environment, your socioeconomic environment. And those are the things that you just sort of live with and accept to be fact. And it's not until you sort of get older and start gaining experience and meeting people and hopefully gaining wisdom that you realize, oh man, I just have a specific set of beliefs, or a map of meaning, if Jordan Peterson would call it, and I need to start looking outside of that. So a lot of you ask me, first of all, how were you a leftist? What happened there? How did that come to be true for you? And then what woke you up? What was the sort of aha moment? And we're going to get there, and you're going to eventually learn that I did not have an aha moment. There was a long and gradual process to getting red-pilled, as we like to call it. So I'll tell you a bit about my story. So, hi everybody, I'm Lepinobi, 21 years old now. When I was a child, I was born and raised in a really rural conservative town in Central Florida. Very yeehaw, how y'all doing, Southern hospitality type town. And that's where I was. And I was a child of 3, so I have a younger sister and an older brother. And I happen to be raised by a single mother. So my mother happens to be white. That is not particularly important to me, but it just becomes important to the story as we go through it and sort of talk about the things that I was taught as a child. Obviously, if you look at me, I'm not the whitest individual. I happen to be half black and half white, but I was raised by my white mother. And through the duration of my childhood, I was taught a lot of leftist ideology because my mother happens to work for the political left, and she still does to this day. And I always try to think back. A lot of these things come to you in retrospect. They're not things that you truly think about when you're living in the experience and you're going through it yourself. And I think back to what was my earliest political memory. And when trying to come to a conclusion on that, I found that I think the 2008 election night was my earliest political memory. And I remember at the time I was 8 years old, and I was so excited because my mom said I could stay up past 9:30. And I thought, okay, this is a fantastic day. I get to sit and watch the election results, which was so boring to me, but I got to stay up past my bedtime. So that was great. And I stayed up and I sat in the living room with my mother, my sister, and I believe my brother was there as well. And we watched as all these votes came in. And I remember not even being really half awake when they actually announced who the president was, Barack Obama. But when this did happen, my mother started bawling her eyes out in front of the TV. And I sat there just sort of as a young kid who had heard whispers about the election. And in school, we were doing our own little class election where we voted for which student we would want to be the president of the class. And I watched my mom crying at the television, and I did not understand it. It baffled me in that moment, because my mom was, as you can imagine, very adamant about what she believed, very strong-willed in what she believed, and very open about it. And she had, of course, supported Barack Obama, and in the work she was doing was helping to gain votes for this candidate. So I watched her crying in front of the TV, and I thought, why is she crying? This is the man that she supported, and now he's president. This is great. And my mom made an effort to tell me, my sister, and my brother that she was crying and so emotional because she never thought a country as racist as America was going to be able to elect a black president. And I remember hearing that at 8 years old and going, oh, what? So this is a weird thing to have a black president? This hasn't happened before? And I remember thinking in that moment that blackness must be something that's really important. And my mother made an effort to teach me that blackness was something that was to be loved and blackness was something that was great, although there were a lot of people that didn't see it that way, and that our country had sort of shaped itself around this narrative and this standard of whiteness, and I fell outside of that standard, so life could have been a little harder for me because of that. So that was 8-year-old me. And again, my mother was a single mother. So on days that she was working and maybe I was off from school, I was going into work with my mother. And I remember being surrounded by people who were very much entrenched in this ideology, teaching it, practicing it, preaching it, and organizing around it, because that's what they did. In the state of Florida, where I'm from, this organization was pretty famous for staging massive protests and organizing through grassroots methods and getting people to protest and join their cause in a really effective manner. So I would go to school with my mother and I'd be drawing on poster boards and coloring in letters on these little posters and picket signs, and little did I know I was making protest signs for the protests that they were going to go out and do. And slowly but surely, as a young person, I would learn this and learn exactly what I was doing and come to have a deep admiration for it and an appreciation for it. And I found that was something that was very much encouraged on at least this side of politics. And we'll talk about whether or not that is actually something that conservatives do as well. But as a young kid, being told a lot, you're the future of America. It's very important that you know these things and that you get involved now so that you can reshape the way that this country looks when you're older. So we had the 2008 stuff. We had this super young girl who was very cognizant of not only her race, but also her gender and this whole idea of patriarchy. And in the background, also, we had police shootings that were starting to become a massive narrative. I remember as a young teenager hearing about Tamir Rice and Eric Garner and Michael Brown and really seeing the Black Lives Matter movement come to fruition. And I would watch these horrifying videos. I think the one that I remember the most is Philando Castile. And I don't remember exactly what year that police shooting happened, but I remember being on my phone, going on social media, pulling this up, and watching Philando Castile get shot and killed by a police officer. In this particular situation, he was stopped during a traffic stop, and Philando was very respectful to this police officer. He made the police officer aware that he did have a firearm in his car, but that he owned it lawfully and legally and that he had no intention of reaching for it. And when asked to reach for his wallet by the police officer shot him. And during this whole encounter, which was absolutely horrific to watch, his girlfriend and his girlfriend's daughter were in this car as well watching this. So you could hear the screams from the girlfriend in the car. You could hear the police officer in the background sort of freaking out over what he had just done. But that video was given to me and sold to me with this narrative of racism, that this is something that happens all the time and that I, as a Black woman, should be really cognizant of it. Not even through my own victimhood of dying at the hands of a police officer, although I did believe that, but that I should be some sort of ally for the Black males in my community, in my life, and in America. So think about all those things happening at once. This influence of leftist ideology from my parental figure, getting it from social media, having teachers who were very open about their leftism as well, and then seeing it on mainstream media in the content that I was watching and being exposed to. As you can imagine, I too became a leftist, and we'll talk about how I began to get more involved and why that is sort of the natural pathway for people who enter this particular avenue of thought. So I went through middle school, and of course I was an activist in a way that was sort of less active than I would become in high school and graduating. But I was constantly arguing with people, constantly picking fights. Again, I lived in a super conservative area, so there was plenty of kids who were willing to argue with me over the things that they believed, whether it was about women's right to an abortion or open borders or policing in America or patriarchy. And I was willing to pick that fight every time if anything, I looked for them, because it came with this sort of self-righteous feeling of I'm doing something right by putting down these people who, in my mind, I hated. I was taught to hate people who were conservative because they represented hatred for me. They represented white supremacy. They represented this massive force that constantly had its thumb pressing down on me and did not want to see me succeed. At least that was what it was in my mind. So I was constantly battling with kids, and that would happen throughout high school as well. I entered high school, and in high school I signed up for a speech class, and every single speech was about dogma without fail. I would get up and talk about how all women should have the right to an abortion under any circumstances. I would talk about how white students need to be allies. I would talk about reparations. I would talk about restorative justice. And I considered myself to be pretty well educated in these things, but only in the sense that I knew the talking points that I was taught, and I knew the catchphrases and the slogans. So I would write these speeches, and every single time people could anticipate what I was going to talk about and how I did it. And sometimes students would complain and pick arguments with me, and every single time I would fight them to the best of my abilities. Or really not the best of my abilities, with the best dogma that I had. And in high school, I had a group of best friends who happened to be conservative, and they, I think, were truly scared to have conversations with me about politics, and we just avoided it at all costs because I was not a nice person. When you couple this ideology and dogma with the hatred that you feel and the anger that you feel towards you white people, towards America, towards our institutions and systems, towards the schooling system, because remember, everything is pitted against you in this vein of thought. I was angry. And I remember that my best friends would talk about reverse racism, which now I truly believe to be just racism. But this concept that white people cannot experience racism because they hold the power in this country. I'm sure you've heard that, Taylor.
Oh, never heard that.
Yeah, but I was taught from a young age that only black people and Hispanic people, not even Asians, because we leave them out of the equation so often when we have political discussions, but that only black people and Hispanic people could truly experience racism because they had a lack of power and a lack of privilege. And because white people held all the power, the privilege, they had higher socioeconomic status, it wasn't possible for you to be racist towards white people. So my white friends would talk to me about how they're seeing all this racist stuff towards white people on the internet. And I would sit there and go, no, you're not, because it doesn't exist. You can't be reverse racist towards white people. And for whatever reason, these girls remained friends with me, and they're still friends with me to this day. But that is who I was. That is what I was like. In particular, in Florida, there was... That state was a hotbed for political discussions. And what really ramped up my involvement and my activism was the Parkland shooting. So the Parkland shooting happens at a high school, and multiple students die because another student decides to bring a gun on campus. Now, knowing the sides of the left, of course, a massive anti-gun and gun reform movement was sparked in the wake of this horrific attack that happened. And I was so ready to jump in. And Florida in particular started pushing for legislation that would allow teachers to have guns on campus, which is honestly a piece of legislation that I still question to this day whether or not that's helpful in saving children's lives. But of course I was angry at this. You want a gun near me on a school campus? How dare you? And I organized every single student that I could to wear red t-shirts and go to the school board, and I gave this bold and impassioned speech to these school board members, which I wish I had a video to show you guys today. It exists somewhere in the ether on the internet. If you guys can find it, please don't ever show me it, because I'm sure it is very, very cringy. But I went to this school board and started protesting them. And I remember saying, I might be a kid now and I might be in high school, but one of these days I'm going to be a constituent. And you better believe that when I am voting you out. Just the amount of self-righteousness that I had at such a young age should have been very, very concerning to me, to my parents, to my school, but it really wasn't. And I was constantly affirmed in this. And after doing that school board protest and giving that speech, I was invited to be a speaker at the March for Our Lives in Orlando. So after the Parkland shooting happened, students everywhere started organizing these protests called March for Our Lives, where they all took to the streets and advocated for gun reform and in some cases a complete and utter ban of the Second Amendment across the United States. And I was invited to speak. So I said, absolutely, I will do that. And unlucky for myself, I have a video of me doing that and giving that speech, and I'm going to react to it here today with you guys and hopefully debunk some of the things I said. I'm going to be just really cringing a lot during this entire video. Luckily, it's only about 3 minutes, so let's go through it. Here we go.
Angle. And while I came here today to witness a movement led by young people just like me, I also came to talk about how this issue has a disproportionate effect on the people of color in our communities. We need to talk about how gun violence is often a daily occurrence for young Black and brown people in our communities and all over the world.
Okay, first of all, my outfit is just so lefty. I have this huge afro, which I like pulled back into like this afro mohawk. I've got the artsy pants on. Who did I think I was? I honestly think that I thought I was Angela Davis at this ripe age of, I believe, 16 when this happened. Wasn't March for Our Lives about 2016, I think?
That sounds right. You know,
that sounds right.
The words that come to mind in watching this is something we say a lot when we look at a lot of these woke TikToks or maybe like a Joy Reid rant or something when they're completely wrong, but we say, it's the confidence for me. It's the confidence for me. Watching you, you are so confident.
I really am. And it's because I was constantly being told by people, this is what you need to do. You're doing the right thing. We need voices like yours. Nobody's going to listen to us, so they need to listen to you. And I thought, yes, I don't need to understand the world. I need to change the world and I need to transform it. And that's what I did. Now, it's funny because sometimes when I go back and listen to myself or I go back and look at old things that I wrote as a leftist, you know how when somebody's talking to you and you're like, you're almost there. You're almost there, but, and then they just jump off the cliff and they're completely wrong. What I just said there is that Black people and young Black and brown people in America are far more likely to be impacted by gun violence in this country. A completely and utterly true statement, what I just said. But am I giving it with the right connotation? Am I giving it with the right facts and the right narrative here? No, I'm talking about this in reference to white shooters of Black people. I'm talking about this when it comes to police officers, when I should be focusing on, you know, what we call now Black on Black crime. And eventually we'll have to take a deep dive into that in another episode. I talked about that a little bit in my policing episode. If you guys want to go back and watch that, it'll be the video right before this on this channel, where we talk about really the disparate impact with gun violence when it comes to Black on Black crime and Black police encounters. Okay, I'm gonna keep watching this. Oh my gosh.
They look no different than me and they live in neighborhoods no different than my own. We need to talk about how people of color are much more likely to lose their lives staring down the barrel of a gun.
Again, true, but largely incorrect.
We need to talk about how this has been a problem for people of color for generations and generations.
Not quite. Not quite. Actually, the recent really big growth in gun violence is not past generations and generations. And you'll find that people on the left love to use this as a talking point. The disparate impact of gun violence has been generations and generations. The disparate impact of mass incarceration has been generations and generations. The socioeconomic decline of the Black family is generations and generations. And then you look into it and you go, ooh, no, it isn't, because actually the Black family was going through sort of this golden age before we instituted this welfare state and started having these conversations around what it means to be Black and identifying Blackness and talking about racism and all these things that sort of draw our attention away from real problems. So, oh, yikes, here we go.
And in the case of the Parkland shooting and many before it, we need to talk about how shooters of white backgrounds are referred to as children, former students, mentally ill individuals, and lonely and confused rather than what they actually are, and that is terrorists.
It's the confidence for me. Oh my gosh, I almost want to cry watching this. You know, a lot of people say, like, you're such a liar, you were never a leftist. And you know what? I wish I was lying, and I wish I did not have video evidence of this happening in my life. Okay, let's talk about what I just said. So I said, so often in the case of mass shooters, we talk about how we call them kids, we call them former students, we call them mentally ill, we call them lonely and confused, instead of calling them what they actually are, terrorists. Again, this is not an argument. And it would have been, I wish somebody had just grabbed me and been like, you know what, you can be all of those things at once, and actually not focusing on the mental health aspect of it, not focusing on that lonely and confused part of it, is actually going to cause more of these things to occur. And as I've gotten older, obviously, and looked into these issues, mental health, things like being on SSRIs, antidepressants, and things like that are closely linked to whether or not you commit mass shootings. And that's something that nobody wants to talk about when we have these discussions. Clearly, I did not want to talk about that at 16. I was so focused on what is just plain to see, what is just right in front of the face. And what is right in front of the face is race and gender. So if I saw somebody who was white and male, I had already made up my mind. That was in the case of police officers and average everyday people. That was in the case of mass shooters. If you were white and male, I was done with you. I already had my narrative. I had my talking points. And obviously this is clear to that. But what shows here is how the ideas that I was given as a young person truly ramped themselves up and came to the forefront as I got older and older and older. Because when I was young, even a little kid, before I knew anything about politics, I was being told that when I went to the grocery store with my mother in my white rural area, that white people would look at me and my mom and give us bad looks. And when I asked, well, why would somebody give me and my mom a bad look? I'm just with my mom in the grocery store. I'm picking up some apples and putting them in the cart. What's going on? And I would be told that it was because I was black and my mom was white, and white people did not think that we should be paired together, did not think that my mom should have married a black man and had a black child. So learn that at 5, 6 years old, and then check back in with that person when they're 16, 17, and into their early 20s. Are we shocked that I turned out like this at that age? Shouldn't be. Let's keep watching.
The rate of death by gun homicide for black and brown people exceeds those among white people in all 50 states.
Why?
We need to start to mend this disparity by declaring all gun violence unacceptable and recognizing the fact that this nation's criminal justice system is based on racism and systemic oppression.
What a non sequitur argument. I don't even know how to debunk that because it makes no sense. Oh my gosh.
The same system that allowed a police officer to shoot Stephen Clark 20 times in his backyard a few days ago.
Woo! Getting shot 20 times! Woo! Keep going.
The people cheering for you is really, that's just as strong a thing as anything, that it's the reinforcement of, it's like, not only are you given these simplistic narratives, like you were saying, it's like literally skin deep narratives about how to interpret the world and how to interpret your own identity, but then you link up with people who are championing that and patting you on the back the more that you just puppet these talking points, even if they don't make sense, which is the crazy part.
Right. And this was a crowd of thousands and thousands of people. I wish the camera had panned over to show you how many people were listening to this and watching and cheering this on. Unbelievable.
The same system that sends people of color to prison for 10% longer sentences than white people for the same crime.
It failed to mention why in those studies that talk about sentencing and that disparate impact on Black people do not look at why that's the case, whether or not the person was a repeat offender, how many people were put in danger during the incident, how many people could have died. What weapon was used during the incident, how violent the crime was, yet they go and they put out these things like, I believe now the stat is that Black people get 20% higher sentences than white people for the same crime. And again, no mention to why these things happen.
Same system that mentally evaluated Dylan Roof, a white shooter who took 9 Black lives as they prayed, not once, but twice, even though he said many times that he knew exactly what he was doing. This is unacceptable and needs to be addressed because where is the justice in this system? And where is the justice in this nation's gun control legislation? We need to seize this moment and this power, not only for school safety, but for everyone's safety. We should feel safe wherever we are, whoever we are. And we will march on these streets today, and believe me when I say that we will march to the polls.
I could not even vote.
You're going to walk them straight up to the poll center and then be like, all right, now you guys go in and vote. I'm going to stay out here and keep screaming at people.
Right. See you guys. This is your polling site. Go ahead in there and make some changes, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. Okay, I think we're almost done here. Let's finish it up. Oh, my gosh.
We all need change, and we need it now, not later, now.
Woo, I think that's it. Wow, a whole lot of nothing was said there, yet cheered on so passionately by a crowd.
If you're not listening closely, then it doesn't sound like you're saying nothing. It sounds like, wow, these people really know what's up, and they wouldn't be so passionate about this if there wasn't something going on here and wasn't a grave injustice that's being protested and wasn't something that I need to join my voice to and start screaming too.
Yes.
That's what it's almost like the mob effect, just like, but sucking you into a whole worldview.
Yeah, and it's, again, I was so disconnected from this. I was speaking in this speech as if, these communities look no different than my community. What do you mean, my white, rural, conservative community? What am I talking about? They do look very different from my community. So much of that was just lies. And I remember working on that speech and like showing it to my mom and the people that worked with her before I did it, just like making sure, does this sound good? Does this sound good? How should I say this? How should I say this? And it's just training in a lot of ways. And I remember being so inspired, not by adults who were in these political movements and giving speeches like this, but other children. If you guys remember and were part of this and keeping up with everything, when the March for Our Lives happened and when the Parkland shooting happened, we saw 2 activists come out of that incident. Actually, a multitude of them, but the 2 that I followed and who were most exposed when it came to media and social media were David Hogg and Emma Gonzalez, 2 students at Parkland who joined this anti-gun and this gun reform movement after the Parkland shooting. And I remember looking at these kids who were the same age as I was and going, wow, I look up to them. And I believe, quote me, correct me if I'm wrong, but Time Magazine did a whole front page thing about how young Americans were going to be leading the charge of change in this country, and they were truly the ones to watch when it came to politics. Imagine that in any other field of study. Imagine saying that for engineering, 13-year-olds were the ones to watch, 13 to 16-year-olds were the one to watch, or for any sort of scientific movement or medical movement that 13-year-olds and 16-year-olds are the ones to watch out for because they're truly going to be guiding the way and shaping our view and our thoughts on things. Insane. And this was in the same era as Greta Thunberg as well, coming out about this whole climate change movement, which I believe she was 13 years old when she started speaking out and becoming famous for this. And the affirmation that I experienced, like you saw in that video, that's thousands of people. Imagine millions of people as a young kid telling you what you're doing is fantastic. And not only is it something that you need to keep doing, but the fate of the world is contingent upon you being the one to speak out and you being the one to be active. And if you don't do it, everything's going to fall apart. The people who are relying on you, your fellow victims, are also going to fall apart as well. That's got to be a lot of weight to hold. And I truly had not really thought about it until this moment now. But as a young person being told that the fate of the world lies in your hands and what you say is an interesting thing. Now, when I graduated high school shortly after making that speech. And I thought, higher education? Absolutely not. We don't need to go to college. The best thing that I can do is become an activist. We have so little time to change the world. I need to do it now. So I went to my mom and said, I don't want to go to college. Can I work for your organization? And she said, okay, let me talk to some people. And she went and talked to them. I did an interview and boom, I was hired. And what was my job? As if the story could not get any more ridiculous. What is fact is often so much more strange than fiction. I got hired to be a youth organizer. And what did that mean? It meant that I was going around to middle schools and high schools and finding students who were politically involved or politically apathetic and going, you heard about socialism? You heard about racism in America? Have you heard about patriarchy? Have you heard about how all women should have the right to an abortion? No? Come and join me, kids. Let me teach you about your own oppression as it was taught to me, and then you can join this organization because guess what? We can't change the world if we don't have you doing it. And I was creating other activists and really instilling fear into other people that their future was in jeopardy if they did not act. And I got all these students to come and join me. And what we did was we basically funneled them through the organization. So they'd come to a meeting with me and I'd go through a little PowerPoint with them. And then I'd say, hey, do you want to come and knock doors for campaigns? Sure, it's super fun. Let's go and do that. They come and knock doors. Okay, do you want to become a fellow? And what the fellows were was that they worked with us for a summer and we paid them a stipend of, I want to say it was like $500. So now not only do you get to have this self-righteous fulfillment of being an activist, but we also paid you for it. And I tell a lot of people when you see these protests, think about how many people are organizers or students who are in these fellowships getting paid to be there because it can be quite a lot. And it was in my case with working with students. So we'd funnel them through the organization. And now I was working with this whole team of young people. And this is a phenomenon that I've thought about for quite some time and just coined it, I think, self-regulating victimhood, that once you've successfully taught somebody that they're a victim, that they're oppressed, they will regulate that for themselves. You don't have to have the conversation again. And not only will they do that, but they will go and convince other people that they are victims as well, because it's the only way out. That's the only way to fight it. And that is what I did. Now, of course, that did not last because I'm here talking to you right now. And so often people, I think, tried to speak to me, or at least wanted to speak to me, and maybe had a fear or an intimidation towards doing so because I was so averse to hearing things that were different from what I believed. I think I actively tried to stay as far away from people who disagreed with me as possible. I did not want to hear it. I viewed it as a personal attack on who I was as a person, and I shut everyone out. And I always try to think about it, was I afraid of being wrong? Is that what truly led me to push people away? Or did I truly have hatred for people who disagreed with me? And maybe it was a combination of both. I'm not sure. Have you ever felt that, Taylor? Of just like, I can't possibly listen to somebody who disagrees with me, either from like a religious fundamentalist standpoint or even a conservative standpoint. Did you have that?
Honestly, I mean, yes, it's obviously like this person is saying something that is so off base, coming from such a grounded in something that is so non-factual that it's unbearable to listen to. But I wouldn't say I ever really had this like hatred for people that are coming from a different place necessarily.
Right.
And which is interesting, like you were talking about how it sucks you in and puts the weight of the world on your shoulders and says, it's all up to you to change the world. I think something else it does is also it puts this simplistic moral paradigm on you to where it's like, it's up to you to defeat this evil. And so you look at the people who disagree with you as fundamentally evil, and you see it as your mission in life, your duty, your responsibility to not just fight back against that evil, but really like destroy them. And that's a different approach. That's like, it's like a moralized approach, and that makes it so much more intense and makes your honest thinking go further in the back of your head.
Right. That's so true, because I remember saying, politics is not just politics. It's who you are as a person. It's what you believe. It is your moral ground that you stand on. And if you're a conservative, you are against me in every way, shape, and form you could possibly be against me. And now, I go on Twitter, when somebody who is very prominent in either of these movements dies, like when we saw the death of Rush Limbaugh, rest in peace, so many people were going on the internet and saying, you know, good riddance, I'm so glad he's dead, I wish it was a horrible and painful death. And you look at that, and at least now I look at that and go, oh my gosh, how can you say that about a person just because you disagreed with them? But then I check back in with 17-year-old me, and that would have been exactly what I thought. I might not have verbalized it or put it on the internet, but it definitely would have been what I thought about that particular person, which is so crazy to me. And we try to think about how people can be so okay with others getting hurt or committing acts of evil. And I think it is very much grounded in that, in our view and our immediate jump to dehumanize people who disagree with us, who represent something outside of our worldview. So that's what I was like. Now we're going to talk about sort of the transformation, how the red pill came through and what happened there. And guys, we're going to cut off on the PragerU channel right now and go only to the Amala Unapologetic channel. It's in the description down below. We're also going to put it in the chat. So if you want to keep watching the rest of this episode, find out what my red pill moments were, go to the Amala channel, check it out, go subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the live chat over there. I am watching and listening. Now,